The Mitsubishi Outlander. We've all seen these things around, but have you ever wondered if it's actually any good? My name's Nish, you're watching The Word on Cars. Let's find out for ourselves, shall we? So, the Outlander's been around since 2001, and after 3 generations since it was released, we're now up to its 4th generation, which, depending on where in the world you live, is classed as either a compact or, as we know it here in Australia, a mid-size SUV. Now, the Outlander is actually based on the Nissan X-Trail and gets the same 2.5-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine and some of the same switchgear on the inside. And in terms of the model lineup, the Outlander comes in quite a few different variants, starting with the ES, which is the base model, all the way up to the Exceed Tourer, which is the top spec model in either 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive with 5 or 7 seats. This one's an Exceed with all-wheel drive and 7 seats with a drive-away price of $57,780, which misses out on 3 additional options that the Exceed Tourer gets. I'll tell you what they are throughout the review. To complicate matters further, you can also get the Outlander as a plug-in hybrid with a 2.4-litre engine from the base model ES to the top spec GSR, which stands for Grand Sport Racing. No idea why they stuck a GSR badge on a hybrid. Don't expect it to be some performance variant, because it's not. The GSR will set you back close to 80 grand and is the most expensive model in the Outlander range. But given the Outlander's been around for a few years now, you can also grab yourself a bargain on the second-hand market with Outlanders like this one, which is for sale at Blinker here in Melbourne, that you can pick up for under $45,000 with the remaining factory warranty. And if you're interested in this Outlander, you'll get an extra 3 years of warranty just by letting the guys and gals at Blinker know that you saw this one on The Word on Cars. Now, I gotta say, I'm a big fan of the styling of the Outlander. Mitsubishi's blended in a touch of futuristic styling and sportiness into the exterior design without it being over the top. The front end gets a sporty swept back grille that blends into the daytime running lights. The headlamp housings are off to the side. And I quite like this chrome trim that rubs everything together beautifully. The Outlander also gets a sporty silhouette with more of a sloping tail end, more chrome trimming around the windows, and these very attractive 20-inch wheels on the corners, which I must admit look fantastic. And I mentioned earlier that the Exceed Tourer gets a few extra options over the Exceed, one being 2-tone exterior paint, which gets the Exceed Tourer a black roof. And while we're talking about exterior colors here, white is the only no-cost option, while the other 6 colors will cost you an extra $740 or $940, depending on the color. This one's finished in sterling silver, which is my pick of the bunch. The back end is a little more simplistic than the front, but I reckon it's still a looker with these slim tail lamps with daytime running lights and sharp lines, especially this one up the top that gives off ducktail spoiler vibes, which adds to the sportiness. What I don't like back here are these fake exhaust cutouts that all manufacturers seem to be including these days. Why not just stick the exhaust through if you're going to the trouble of including these? Makes no bloody sense at all. Now, before we get onto the interior, the front doors open up to give you plenty of room for getting in and out. And being an SUV with a higher ride height, it's not difficult to step in and out either, so you can get away without needing side steps. Mitsubishi also throws in a key with the usual functions, which actually looks a touch futuristic. Then we have the interior of the Outlander, which I must say, I didn't expect to be this nice. This one has the quilted black leather interior, but you can go for the optional light grey interior at no extra cost if that's your jam. The seats and door cards are also quilted, regardless of the interior color. Mitsubishi have really tried to crank up the luxury feel in here. There are soft touch surfaces on the tops of the doors and dashboard. Even the console is wrapped in some sort of artificial leather. You'll also find brushed aluminium trimmings about the interior. Some of the switches and knobs in here are finished in brushed aluminium as well, which I think is a really nice touch. Don't get me wrong though, there is a fair bit of textured plastic around as well, but for what this SUV is, that's expected. Oh, and the top spec Exceed Tourer also gets a 2-tone higher grade leather interior with massaging seats for the driver and passenger, if this isn't plush enough for you, which are the only other options that the Exceed doesn't have compared to the Exceed Tourer and GSR models. There's also plenty of space in here for my 5'9" self when it comes to headroom, legroom, and even knee room, even though the steering wheel only gets tilt adjustment. The cabin's also nice and open with plenty of light coming in thanks to the panoramic roof that extends well and truly beyond into the back. And the seats are properly comfortable with electric adjustment for the folks up front. Mitsubishi even throws in memory seats for the driver and passenger, which I think makes perfect sense if you're sharing the driving with the other half. The Outlander also gets plenty of tech in here, starting with the 9-inch touchscreen, which is a tad on the smaller side compared to what's on offer these days, but it's big enough for everything you need to see and has the usual functions, including wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The system works okay and it's easy enough to use. It's responsive, but the screen can be a little laggy when you're moving from screen to screen. You also get a row of quick access buttons and dials for volume and media under the screen, which is always nice. For your music needs, there's a 10-speaker Bose premium sound system in here, which sounds okay. The highs aren't as crisp as I'd like, and the mid-range could be better, but the low end isn't bad at all. I think most people will be happy with the system in this. Mitsubishi also throws in a dedicated row of dials and buttons and a separate screen to control the 3-zone climate control within easy reach, which includes controls for the heated front seats. Now, while we're here, the center console is also home to the gear selector, which works the same way as it does in the X-Trail. Slide it forward for reverse, or pull the lever back and hold for neutral, or pull it all the way back for drive or manual mode if you feel like rowing through gears yourself using the paddles on the steering wheel. In reverse, there's a surround view and backup camera with a few different views to choose from. The side view is fantastic when you're parking because you can line up the grid lines against the lines on the ground to make sure your nose isn't sticking out and you're centered in the spot. Mitsubishi does also include front and rear parking sensors. There's also a drive mode selector with 6 modes to choose from and hill descent control, which I'll show you when we talk about the instrument cluster, along with the electric parking brake and auto hold buttons. Even though the Outlander misses out on a giant infotainment screen, you do get a 12.3-inch instrument cluster, which I reckon makes up for it. The graphics look fantastic, especially when you start the system, and the screen is customizable with 2 different views to choose from. I'm a big fan of this one, which looks brilliant, but also makes room for more information in the middle. There's trip information, information on Mitsubishi's Super All-Wheel Control, navigation, audio and phone, driver assistance, settings, and a home screen that hides everything away. And when it comes to switching between drive modes, the Outlander gets these very cool graphics for Eco, Normal, Tarmac, Gravel, Snow, and Mud modes. The Outlander also gets a substantial and configurable 10.8-inch heads-up display that includes everything you need to see in front of you. So instrumentation in here is on point. Everything I just mentioned is controlled through the buttons on the steering wheel. The controls are the same as what you find in the X-Trail, even though the steering wheel gets a different design. And speaking of driver assistance technology, Mitsubishi hasn't skimped out on any of it and includes MyTech or Mitsubishi Innovative Technology, so you'll find everything you need in here. Adaptive cruise control with stop and go, active lane keeping, blind spot monitoring, front and rear emergency braking, traffic sign recognition, free cross traffic alert, and driver attention detection. The Outlander also gets MyPilot, which brings the driver assistance systems together, so the Outlander can do most of the driving for you on the highway. And there's ample storage in here as well, with a glove box on the dash that's big enough, space under the climate controls for phones with a wireless charger, USB-A and USB-C ports, and a 12-volt power outlet, a couple of cup holders that are spring-loaded to keep cups in place, storage under the center armrest, which is a little on the smaller side to be honest, storage on either side of the center console, and bins in the front doors that can take large bottles. So, plenty of storage. Then we have the back seats in the Outlander. Now, unlike the X-Trail, the doors back here don't open up to 90 degrees, but they open wide enough to get kids or car seats in and out easily. The back seats get the same luxe treatment as the front, with quilted leather on the doors and the seats. The seats are comfortable, and you can slide these back and forth independently of each other. Now, the seat back can't be reclined, but you can move it into a couple of different positions to get comfortable as well. Space in here is also fantastic. I've got plenty of headroom, I can slide my feet under the front seat and stretch out, and my knees are nowhere near the front seat with the driver's seat set to my driving position. And the seats are wide enough for adults back here, but as is with most mid-size SUVs, an adult passenger in the middle will be squashed. There's also a small squared off hump on the floor that sits low and wide, so it doesn't really rob any floor space. Even an adult foot will sit on top of it without any issues. In terms of creature comforts back here, passengers get their own vents, climate controls to set the temp, USB-A and USB-C ports, map pockets along with 2 smaller pockets up top, perfect for phones or books on the back of the front seats, integrated sunshades on the doors, which is handy if you have kids, Isofix points and top tether mounts for the outboard seats for baby or booster seats, door bins with bottle holders, and cup holders on the center armrest, which, like the X-Trail, leaves a gaping hole into the cargo area or third row when the armrest is down, which I think is a silly design and cost-cutting taken to another level. Then there's the third row, which definitely wasn't designed for adults. First things first though, to get into the back, pull the latch on the top of the seat and it'll fold and move forward in one motion. It's easy enough to get back here. And when you're back here and want out, pull the same latches and the seat will fold and move forward. Now, like I said, these seats aren't for adults unless you really want to piss someone off. It's cramped back here. I've had to slide the second row as far forward as possible to squeeze in. My hair is touching the headliner, so bugger all headroom back here, and although I have a little knee room with the seats pushed forward, it'd be non-existent if the second row was pushed back. My toes do slide under the second row seats, which gives my feet just enough room to fit. On the plus side, given there are only 2 seats back here, the seat backs are wide enough for adults, but you definitely wouldn't want to put anyone other than kids in these seats. In terms of luxuries, all you're getting are a couple of cup holders and 2 storage spaces on either side that are good for phones or books. That's it, which, to be fair, is pretty much what you'd expect in this segment at this price. In terms of the cargo area, you get an electric tailgate with hands-free operation to get in, and space-wise, the 7-seater Outlander gets 163 litres when you're using the third row seats. Drop these down by pulling the straps on the tops of the seats, and space bumps up to 478 litres, which is decent. If you need more space, you can drop the second row down by pulling the latches in the cargo area for a massive 1,461 litres, which compared to the 945 litres its X-Trail sibling offers is a huge difference. You do also get extra space under the floor, but most of that will be taken up by the cargo blind and headrests for the third row. They don't fold away with the rest of the seat. Space aside, you'll also find tie downs for the third row seat belts to keep them out of the way when the seats aren't in use, a 12-volt power outlet, and storage bins on either side of the floor, which will be obstructed if you've packed the cargo blind under the floor. So, driving the Mitsubishi Outlander. Now, engine first. We have a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated motor under the hood and no turbos, which means that this is only really good for about 135 kilowatts of power and 245 newton meters of torque. And that translates to a 0-100 time of around 10 seconds. So even though it looks sporty on the outside, it's definitely not sporty. I mean, you put your foot into it and it makes a lot of noise and it builds speed, but very gradually. And that's going to be fine for most people out there. At the end of the day, this is a 7-seat people mover. Now, Mitsubishi don't actually even include a sport mode in this. What you get is a tarmac mode, and that's meant to be for a fast-paced experience. I'm not too sure how fast-paced the experience is because, once again, build speed in a very untheatrical way. Now, this thing weighs around 1,725 kilograms. That's a tear weight, and I think the engine is ample to push that weight around. If you had a fully loaded car with 7 people in here, that might have a bit of an effect on the overall performance. But again, I think most people that buy something like the Outlander aren't really going to be too fussed by that. Towing wise, this thing does okay. It'll pull 750 kilograms with an unbraked setup or up to 1,600 kilograms with a brake setup. And fuel consumption wise, the Outlander is good for 8.1 litres per 100 kilometers, keeping in mind that this does have full-time all-wheel drive, so all 4 wheels are turning at all times, unlike other SUVs out there that have the option of switching in and out between front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, which will save a bit more fuel. But with this setup, it's 8.1 litres per 100 kilometers, which I suppose isn't too bad in this segment. Now, the engine is mated to an 8-speed CVT or constantly variable transmission, and that works exactly as you would expect a CVT to work. When you plant your foot into it, it revs, holds the revs, flicks through gears, and it's a CVT. Now, you can put this into manual mode, which gives you access to the 8 artificial gears that this has, and you know what, it's as close to realistic as it gets. You can use the paddle shifters on the steering wheel to bang down gears, and the gear changes are quick. Upshifts are also just as quick, but again, it's artificial. Only really good for overtaking, in my opinion. I was driving this thing around the corners in manual mode, and it doesn't like to hold gears for too long. It gets to the point where it goes, yeah, I need to change gears now, and it does. So CVT is really about being as efficient as possible. That's where you get the 8.1 litres per 100 kilometers from. Well, the gearbox will certainly contribute towards that. But all in all, as far as a gearbox in a car like the Outlander goes, it works perfectly fine and most people will be comfortable with it. It's super smooth when you leave it in drive and it just does its thing. Again, being a CVT, have an infinite amount of gears to choose from, so the car will just flick through those gears quite seamlessly, to be honest. And I think that's really all I can say about it. Now, on the topic of all-wheel drive, the Outlander gets what Mitsubishi calls super all-wheel control, which is different to the basic all-wheel control system. Now, the basic system will manage torque distribution between the front and rear axles, whereas the super all-wheel control system manages torque distribution from the left and right across both front and rear axles as well to manage grip and traction. Mitsubishi also includes what they call active yaw control in the Outlander, and that's derived from their days in WRC. And that essentially is a brake-based torque vectoring system, and that'll brake wheels individually, all four wheels individually, to make sure that you can go around corners and have grip at the wheel that needs it the most. So quite impressive systems, and the Outlander gets both of them. Now, one would think with systems like super all-wheel control and active yaw control that this thing would be an absolute beast around the corners, but it's not, because it's not set up to be a performer when it comes to cornering. Those systems will work really well with the off-road modes that this has, snow, gravel and mud, to make sure you have the most traction to get you out of a sticky situation. And don't get me wrong, it does go around corners quite well. A little bit of understeer, as you would expect in an all-wheel drive setup, but it's not performance oriented. It is comfortable though. It does float down the road. The suspension in this with fixed spring rates, it doesn't have adaptive dampers or anything like that. Gets you down the road quite comfortably. Now, I will say the 20-inch wheels on this will let you know when you've hit a pothole because of the low profile tires on those. But otherwise, it is fine. There is also a little bit of rebound on this, and it does take a tick to settle when you've gone over an uneven surface on the road. But again, it's comfortable. Most people that get behind the wheel of the Outlander will be quite happy with the way this gets down the road. And from a steering perspective, this thing is set up to be nice and light. I mean, it makes driving the Outlander a breeze. Now, I have noticed in tarmac mode that it does stiffen up ever so slightly. And when it comes to feedback, you can definitely tell that this has an electric steering rack because there's very little front end feedback. It feels disconnected from the wheels. But really none of that matters, because at the end of the day, when you turn the steering wheel, it changes directions and it does what it's supposed to do. The brakes in the Outlander are also fine. It's ample for the 1,700 kilograms of weight this thing's lugging around. Pedal feels nice, it's progressive, so when you are coming to a stop, you're not going to feel uncomfortable. And the pedal itself is nice and soft, so you're not going to feel like you're having a workout behind the wheel of the Outlander. And as far as the interior goes, I'm quite impressed with the Outlander because it's a really nice place to be. The seats are super comfortable. The cabin is nice and quiet, although I will say there is a little bit of wind noise that comes through. And surprisingly, there is very little tire noise, even though this is rolling on 20-inch wheels. Like I've also mentioned throughout this video, it's got all the creature comforts that people look for these days. All the driver assistance systems work the way they're supposed to. I mean, Mitsubishi's really lifted their game when it comes to the Outlander and tried to pitch this more as a luxurious car. And I think, to most part, it's there. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. There is certainly ways that Mitsubishi could refine this. But overall though, I think most people that have a look at the Outlander, get behind the wheel of it, will be quite impressed with what Mitsubishi's pulled together as a package. So, all in all, the Outlander Exceed is quite an impressive mid-sized SUV. I must admit that I wasn't expecting to like it, but I do. Mitsubishi have come leaps and bounds with this thing, and it definitely stands out against other SUVs for the right reasons, which explains why you see more and more Outlanders on the road these days. And unless you're hell-bent on the blacked out roof, massage seats and two-tone leather interior, which mind you adds around another $3,000 to the price, the Exceed, with everything Mitsubishi has thrown into it, is the way to go. Now, before I wrap up, I want to take a moment to appreciate all of you out there that have shown the channel support. Now, the channel doesn't have a whole lot of subscribers yet, but I truly appreciate all of you out there that have subscribed, watched my reviews, and even encouraged me to keep going through comments. So a big heartfelt thank you goes out to all of you. And if you're new to the channel and enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. Enjoy your day or night, depending on where in the world you are, and I'll catch you in the next video.